here, and I'm particularly grateful to be here with Elizabeth. We spent the day at the Squamish Lodge on a project that Elizabeth brought me into several years ago. We created a roundtable with indigenous leaders from around North America. And there's a weekend that's generally put together where indigenous leaders come together and share their ancient knowledge that's passed on generation to generation. And it's really about going into a very deep discussion about coming into resonance with the natural world. So we just came from a wonderful opportunity, and anytime we get a chance to get together with David and Fran, we're always grateful. David, thank you for the introduction. And I want to say that your work, particularly your work on when corporations rule the world, you really were able to catch what was an advancing tide that unfortunately has enveloped our politics, particularly with the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United. So this is a very special community here at Bainbridge Island, and it's even more special because you've got David and Fran Horton with their particular commitment and brilliance, and I thank you. Please join me in thanking you. I don't know if I'd be here, and many of you wouldn't be here if Kat hadn't been holding strong and getting us all organized. So please, Kat, thank you. I understand this is being filmed tonight, and they told me to stay in the light.
Step into the light, Luke.
Yeah, I've heard that before. Can't go too wrong doing that. This evening, let's this be a discussion. So I'm going to make some preliminary remarks, but I want to hear from you as well. I want us to have a discussion about the direction our beloved country ought to be going. We're painfully familiar with the direction it's headed in at this point, and we know that it needs to not just correct the course, but to dramatically change it. I'd like to start with just sharing with you my own experience in the last few years, which have caused me to understand how important it is to be in Congress to be able to challenge the consensus which may prevail at any particular time. I remember it was back in October of 2008 when George Bush and his administration was beating the drums for war against Iraq. And at that time, it seemed that the impulse towards war was so strong, it was palpable. But there were no facts to support the kind of dramatic intervention which we made into Iraq. And I took the time, considerable amount of time, to look at every individual case that was being made for war. Famously, that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, the attempt to tie Iraq to 9/11, to say that Iraq had the intention, capability of attacking the United States. And through the research that I did, I was able to demonstrate that there was not a cause for war. Now, it's really an interesting experience when you have a mania building up to sweep a country to war. It's interesting to watch it. It's almost like having the privilege of being a scientist who's watching a virus at work actually penetrate into a species. Because men and women who otherwise might be gentle and kind individuals all of a sudden have this passion that overtakes them and get swept up into the cause of war. And today, here we are, 2011, we're still in Iraq. And there's plans, we have permanent bases, they're built there. I don't care what anybody says about how, we're taking our troops out. We are going to have troops in Iraq for the foreseeable future, given the current policies. And we built an embassy there. It's the largest embassy in the world. And there's no no sign that the United States is ready to truly leave Iraq. And yet we know the whole thing was based on lies. I think about this often because I think, how in the world could we get swept up into this? I think about it not only in terms of the long-range cost to the American people. Many of you who have read Joseph Stiglitz and Linda Vilma's book, The $3 Trillion War, know that they project actually to as much as $5 trillion for the aggregate cost of the war in Iraq alone. We wonder why we have a deficit. There's the war, tax cuts, Medicare Part D. I mean, after a while, these trillions of dollars start to add up. And yet the type of thinking that took us into Iraq and that keeps us there is still very much at work in our nation's policy making. That we can still be in Afghanistan. And just this past week, we see the folly of this continued occupation where 9 American soldiers were killed by a member of the Afghan military who, whether or not he was connected to the Taliban is almost beside the point. The point is that we go in, we fight and kill and occupy, and we think this is the way you make friends and influence people. The thing that concerns me most about Iraq is that, in addition to the fact that the number of brave men and women who serve this country have been lost, is the fact that years ago, Lancet did a study that showed there were over 600,000 increased deaths during the period of the U.S. invasion and occupation and war in Iraq. And projecting from that number, as Joseph Stiglitz does, and I've done some of my own calculations, it is not a stretch to say that as many as 1 million innocent Iraqis have lost their lives as subsequent to the U.S. invasion. This is a stunning condition where we find that our nation, seemingly with the best of intentions, but in reality, lies that took us into war, was responsible for so many innocent civilians being killed. And frankly, I think one of the major mistakes that has occurred in the present administration is that when the president took office, he moved to effect a sort of an alignment with some of the policies of the Bush administration, instead of giving America a chance to be able to free itself from the stain of the Iraq War by saying that President Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, and that whole group should be subject to a war crimes prosecution. So we find ourselves simultaneously, we're in Iraq for a war that's going to cost, that will ultimately cost between $3 and $5 trillion, depending on the length and the number of people who are occupying. We're continuing in Afghanistan, a war that's already cost $500 billion. We are continuing in Pakistan through these drones and have spent tens of billions of dollars already. And if you follow the events in Pakistan, there is a revolt among the Pakistani people against their own government for, among other reasons, the U.S. involvement with these drones, where in order to kill one alleged al-Qaeda leader, about 300 civilians were killed by these drone missiles. And we should get into the issue of extrajudicial killings. What's going on in America? Who is it who's decided that you could take a fickle finger of fate, press a button, and basically incinerate someone because we think they belong to some nefarious organization? Where did that come from? How did we get to the point of using assassination as some kind of a policy tool we don't even need to, yes, we should get into the fact that, it's against every law. And yet we are now pursuing it as a policy. In Libya today, some of you may be aware of the news today, a NATO missile strike hit a residential area and a house, killing one of Gaddafi's youngest sons, 29 years old, and 3 grandchildren, and others in the house. And I heard the U.S. ambassador to Libya the other day basically endorse assassination as a policy. What's happening to our country? This is fundamentally wrong. We cannot cause the rule of law to be set aside and then at the same time ask other nations to participate in the rule of law. We cannot cause other leaders to be subject to the scrutiny of international legal rubric, and at the same time cause our leaders to be spared from it. It's time that America joined the International Criminal Court, and it's time that our leaders were subject to prosecution for their misdeeds and for any kind of innocent people that we kill. I mean, too widely apprehensive. And we talk about 2012. We have to start taking a measure of where we are. And it's not simply that we're in 2 occupations, Iraq, Afghanistan, that we're in 2 additional wars in Pakistan and Libya, but it's also that we're at a time when we're said to have limited resources, and yet we have over 1,000 bases spread all over the world. Was anybody told in the Pentagon that World War II is over? Well, we have dozens of bases in Japan, dozens of bases in Germany. We have an army of over 1 million people, and we've got them spread everywhere. And we're told we're going broke back home. Yet the Pentagon takes over 50% of the discretionary spending of the United States budget. So, what's happening? Education getting cut, health care benefits getting cut, Social Security said to be on the block with this Committee of Financial Advisors. And so the things that help to build a real social network, the things that really mean something to help an individual human being grow, those are being cut. And the things that demean us as human beings, the things that feed into our deepest fears, the things that cause us to have great anxiety about the future, keeps getting fed. So I think that we're at a point in the history of this country where it's not just about assessing what we do for an election season that's coming up, but this is a time that we have to begin a new discussion about who we are as a nation, and about the direction that America should be going as a nation. What should be our position in the world community? Is there such a thing as a Pax Americana, or have we reached a point of Pax Americana because of our unilateralism, preemption, first strike doctrines that should have left the White House when George Bush left the White House? Yes. We have a right to accept that our nation stands for more than war. And we have a moment in history now to challenge this entire doctrine of the necessity of war. There is a psychology here that says that when you believe war is inevitable, war becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Here we are, in 2011, and we still believe that you can use bombs to settle things. No less than a philosopher, a statesman, and a songwriter than Michael Franti said it better than I could. He said, you can bomb the world to pieces, but you can't bomb the world to peace. You can bomb the world to pieces, but you can't bomb the world to peace. He said it to music. But there's no rhyme or reason to the kind of policies we're pursuing right now that says that we can put drones in the skies over any country we well please and get someone in the camera and determine that this individual should be executed because we've got the information that claims it right. When you look at the record of Guantanamo, how many innocent people were locked up on the testimony of generally about a half dozen individuals, everyone else was affected, and then they find, well, they just don't have the goods, and then they use torture to try to get the goods on people, you start to wonder, where are we headed as a nation? And I think that this is the moment when we have the opportunity to say, number one, out of Iraq, out of Afghanistan, out of Pakistan, out of Libya, bring our military back home, defend America, help America with the ability to defend itself, but stop this movement for empire. Those days are over, and they ought to be over. What are we afraid of? You know, one of the casualties of 9/11, I think, was our sense of confidence as a nation. And not that America was a peachy keen place before 9/11, but the one thing that happened in 9/11 is that we were drawn into a fear. I see it in Washington, where before 9/11, the area in front of the Capitol looked like one of the most beautiful parks. And now, as police armed with all kinds of heavy armaments, streets that literally fold up. They cut down an old-growth forest so that there was an unobstructed view. Trees are over 100 trees that were over 125 years old. Just chopped them all down. The cameras that are everywhere. The national security state that has included through the Patriot Act, giving the government the ability to go very deeply into people's lives. To be able to intercept their emails or phone calls, going through their financial records or educational records, with very little review. And any FBI agent can, because he or she may be directed by some interest, can start to probe very deeply in anybody's background. And it's very clear that the militarization of our society that has accelerated since 9/11 has attended a erosion of our civil liberties, has made us profoundly less democratic, has produced a kind of militarization of thought where even our best leaders are not aware that there's another option to pursue. The science of human relations, what's that? Oh, get me a drone. We have to, not simply, I'm not talking about America withdrawing from the world. We need to participate with the world community. That's what the Biological Weapons Convention, the Chemical Weapons Convention, the Small Arms Treaty, the Landmine Treaty, the International Criminal Court, that's what those treaties are about. We need to fully participate in them. We need to lead the way towards nuclear disarmament. We have to... What kind of a lesson is it when we tell Iran, don't you dare develop anything that looks like something beyond a nuclear technology with any aggressive intent. And at the same time, we're still building new nuclear weapons. So we built in the last few years these weapons called bunker busters, which have the ability to go very deep through concrete, through a very great thickness of concrete, and blow up something 60 feet below the earth. But the debris that's swept up and goes up and out into the atmosphere is radioactive. And these are atomic bombs, like a mini Hiroshima, a mini Nagasaki bomb, but the effect of it in the environment is extraordinary. And we're still talking about these kind of weapons. You hear these dark discussions in the halls of Congress about, well, maybe they'll use such a bomb to try to go after Gaddafi. There's something wrong in our country when we have let our entire national dialogue be usurped by war and militarism. And that's why, we say, well, we're running out of money. Look, David and I are in a discussion about monetary policy, as David mentioned. the first romantic encounter I had with a woman who was due to become my wife was she came to my office to talk about monetary policy. And it's something I, frankly, hadn't given a lot of thought to until I met Elizabeth. And after I met her, I gave a lot of thought to monetary policy. Actually, this 2 days from now is going to be the 6th anniversary of the time that Elizabeth walked into my office and changed my life. But we're at a point right now where we have to make some decisions about the direction the country goes towards. And we're told that, well, you know, we can't have it the way we thought we could have it before, and so we're telling senior citizens that they may have to accept reductions in their Medicare benefits. Republicans want to make sure that happens. We're telling senior citizens, well, you know, there's a new discussion about Social Security, maybe we'll raise the age of retirement. No, you know, that's not necessary. And frankly, coming from Cleveland, Ohio, I can tell you that people who have worked on a job, particularly in industry, for 30, 40 years, their bodies have broken down. They need to retire, or at least have the option to retire. But they don't. But there's changes in the offing, unless we fight back, that could push the date back for people. It's a very simple fix. All we have to do is lift the caps, so that people who make more pay a little bit more and have enough coverage. What's the big deal? But if you're on Wall Street, the land of speculation and honey, you have a situation where they'll look to the revenues of Social Security as another opportunity to be able to drive speculation in a market, and if they can grab hold of a chunk of Social Security, partially privatize it, then we're looking at a whole new area where the hedge funds and the speculators can just run wild, and then people have to go to the Wall Street Journal every day at the advanced declines and unchanged, look at the last 3 numbers, and decide whether or not you're going to have your regular Social Security check this month, or if the market's down, and, you know, Grandma, Grandpa, maybe you have to take a little bit less because the market didn't perform so well. Social Security's always delivered. Social Security is rock solid through the year 2040 without any changes whatsoever. Now, a mathematical problem we may have 30 years from now is not a problem today, excuse me. Doesn't mean we can't prepare, doesn't mean we can't lift the caps, but they're trying to stampede people into a belief that Social Security is just going to fall apart. It is not. Now, is it possible that you could just try to grab, you know, money from the trust fund and find a way to give those IOUs to the trust fund while at the same time you're jacking up spending for war? Sure, Bush did that. That's possible. But is that acceptable or even permissible? No. So we shouldn't be worrying about whether the public retirement program is viable. It is viable. We shouldn't be worrying about whether Medicare is viable. Do you know that when Medicare Part D passed, well, of course you know. You know, remember that they took the price controls off of the pharmaceutical companies and let the pharmaceutical companies tell the government what the government should pay on behalf of Medicare recipients. That was a windfall of hundreds of billions of dollars for the pharmaceutical companies. Veterans always negotiated the rock bottom price for members of the veterans VA hospital system. And the savings were passed along to the veterans. What's happened here is the price of prescription drugs went up, and the pharmaceutical companies got a windfall, and the budget took a hit. And this was all part of a plan, frankly, to try to undermine public confidence in the Medicare system. It's a racket. So the economy that we have right now is hobbled by tax cuts that accelerated the wealth upwards, by energy policies that have accelerated the wealth upwards, the speculation that's going on right now in the Commodity Futures Trading Commission with respect to oil, has jacked up the price of oil without regard to the law of supply and demand. Oil is just another commodity for speculation. That's why people are paying $4 to $5 a gallon right now. This economy, where there are over 14 million people out of work, where there's another 12 million people underemployed, where there's 10 million people who have lost their homes, where there's 50 million people without health care, and where there's millions of people whose private retirement security has been jeopardized or jettisoned, is an economy which is working only for some at the expense of the many. And part of our discussion for 2012 has to be, how do we make America a more socially and economically just society? And we have to have policies, our Democratic Party has to stand for policies that can help make that happen. And, you know, our party has its own problems because, you know, while we're now at the congressional level, I think, outraising the Republicans, in many cases, we're just doing it because the corporate interests are betting on a different horse this election. And the problem is the corporate control of our government. It is a problem that is deep rooted in our democracy. It's just a fact. And it doesn't mean that the members of Congress are evil people. They're not. There's a lot of good people in Congress, but it means the system, with the help of a Supreme Court, the Buckley versus Valeo ruling, with the acceleration of the Supreme Court, the Citizens United ruling, the system has been set up so that money rules the game. And the corporations, you know, many of whom are, you know, contribute through all kinds of fancy funds and, you know, good government funds, are able to frustrate any serious change that would protect our environment, protect our waters, our lakes, our rivers, our oceans, that would enable us to have alternative energy at the forefront, that would enable us to be a more peaceful government, that would enable us to have sane agricultural policies, that would enable us to have a healthier society, including, by the way, our children who are healthier. All of these policies, all of these policy outputs, which are negative for our society, can be directly traced to a campaign finance structure, which is it's like an auction. Policy goes to the highest bidder. Yeah. And when you have corporations who somehow, magically, in 1895, assumed a sort of personhood, they have actually assumed a position in our society which is superior to any of us as individuals. How did that happen? You know, there's been this hue and cry, this craziness about the land, about the president's birth certificate. Well, I've got another thing I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the corporation's birth certificates. And I want to know what makes them do that. I want to know why we don't have policies as a government where a corporation performs in a way that's against the public interest, why you can't just punch their license to do business and say, you're out of here, you're done. You cheated the public, you lied, you stole from your shareholders, you lied, and you have created havoc in markets, you're done. Yes. Now, so, it's not as though we still cannot get control of the levers of government. But we have to have a determination from the top of our government and at every level to say, look, this is the time we have to change. And that's where you come in. And this is such a terrific activist community. And it's not just about your member of Congress who does an excellent job, but it's about all of the people in this delegation. It's about anybody you can pick up a phone and call anywhere in the country to encourage them to start to take more progressive stance on issues. I think the Democratic Party can be reclaimed by the people of this country. But it's really going to take a concerted effort on the part of the grassroots, not just to send emails and write letters, but to go visit and to come up with meetings in communities where we come up with an agenda and say, this is what we want. Not just politicians coming to you and saying, well, this is what you're going to get. So this is really a chance for us to kind of breathe in and claim the power that we have as citizens to stand up and speak out and change the agenda. One of my favorite paintings by the great American artist Norman Rockwell is the one of a man who he's in a town hall meeting, obviously just stood up and is about to speak. It's called Freedom of Speech. And that is a very powerful moment when any one of us determines to stand up and say what's on our mind. And often we won't do that. We wait for someone else to do that. Emerson wrote about that in his essay on self-reliance. He talked about sitting and listening to someone and having his own words come back to him with a sense of alienated majesty. And yet when we come into resonance with our power to affect the outcome, we start to think that those little moments when we could say something, in a meeting, at work, in a store, somebody says something, or you say something, and let me tell you, it starts to change things. We need a public that's more involved in those individual acts as well as in mass. We're at a time when masses of people do have the ability to change what would seem to be structures that were unchangeable. The events in Tunisia and in particularly in Egypt are quite instructive because when millions of people start to show up, it presents the possibility for transformative change. We have all of our social media, we're all skilled in using it, but the fact of the matter is, it is when we come together and see each other and feel each other and the sense of humanity starts to percolate and we start to feel the strength that we might have. And when that is moved aloft by a spirit, or even a spiritus mundi, a spirit of the world, that is propelled by love, nonviolence, the potential for change is extraordinary. And so at this time in the history of our country, this is our moment to stand up. This is our moment to be visible. This is our moment to say that we're not going to accept unemployment, that we want a full employment economy, that we want jobs for all, health care for all, education for all, retirement security for all, and we want peace. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, I know there's a couple mics here, and however you want to do this, Kat, you want to